Okay.
Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Out of Nowhere. Well, I've got a fantastic guest on my show today. His name is Scott Walter. Um, Scott runs American Petrographic Services Laboratory in St. Paul's, Minnesota, where him and his team of geologists have conducted over 5,000 investigations on the concrete, rock, and stone and artifacts, including the fire damaged concrete from the Pentagon following the attacks of 9/11. Can we please welcome Scott to the show? Hello there.
Hey, hello. Thanks for having me on, Bob. I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to whatever it is we're going to talk about. I'll talk about anything.
I know this. I know it. How did it all start out for you with the
Ah,
Kensington Stone?
yeah, the rune stone is where it all started. And in fact, there's a full size cast. I'm looking at it right now that was made from the original. But back in July of 2000, I was minding my own business, running my materials forensic laboratory that you talked about, American Petrographic Services, and American Engineering and Testing is a sister company to us. And I remember when the guy came into the lab, it was clear that he was an advocate for the authenticity of the runestone, and I had to straighten him out. And I said, look, I'll do this analysis for you, but you need to understand that I may come back and give you news you're not going to like, and you're still going to pay me because
I like that.
that's the beautiful thing. I get paid either way. It doesn't matter what the results are. It's a beautiful thing. But anyway, long story short, I conducted a forensic study where I compared the weathering of tombstones with the weathering of the runestone, and I concluded that it was older than 200 years. And that was from 1898 when it was pulled out of the ground. And I know in Europe that's not very old. But going back 200 years from that in our country is
Yeah.
really old. And there was nobody in Minnesota back in the late 1600s. So I concluded it had to be genuine, and I really thought that would be the end of it. I published my findings, and for some reason, the media caught hold of it, and it caused quite an uproar. And then I got this pushback. And I thought it was over. And I thought, well, good for them. They got one. And I was ready to move on. But the pushback was quite severe, and it was quite nasty. And I didn't appreciate that. And at first I was confused. And I said, look, I'm not perfect. If I made a mistake, point it out to me and I'll fix it. Well, I didn't make a mistake. They just didn't like the results. Well, guess what?
Ah,
Life doesn't always go your way, does it?
that's true.
So tough hop. And but in the end, what I decided was I couldn't understand why people would not accept the results despite how conclusive they were. And so I decided to dig deeper. That led to 5 trips to Sweden to look for all the runes, the dialect, the grammar, the dating, everything. And I found it all. Because here's the thing, Bob, I trust rocks. I don't trust some people. Rocks don't care. People care. And so I knew that if the rock told me it was real, then everything in that inscription must go back to the 14th century because it's dated 1362, and in fact everything does. Now, just to sort of finish this little monologue I'm on, what I have since learned is that there are a lot of inconvenient truths that the runestone reveals about history. And there are certain entities that don't like the who carved it, where did they come from, why did they come to North America, and most importantly, why. And that entity is the Roman Catholic Church. And unfortunately for them, it doesn't serve their narrative. And I'll just leave it at that.
I like that. When you talk about the runes and the language on the stones
Yep.
compared to medieval North inscriptions, then.
Well, yes. I mean, what I did was I went to the island of Gotland. And as it turned out, ironically, when I was there in 2003 and 2005, remember, I took 5 trips there.
Yeah, you
Uh,
did.
there are hundreds of medieval grave slabs that are primarily mortared into the floors of 92 Cistercian churches on the island. They're all Cistercian. Now you have to understand, I didn't know what a Cistercian was, but I can read and I can do research, and I figured out pretty quick who they were. And then it didn't take long that the trail led to the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar are Cistercian monks. And I've had a lot of people that got, all worked up because, oh, isn't that convenient? The Knights Templar, the Da Vinci Code, and all of that. And I said, look, I just followed the evidence trail. And Bob, you have to understand something about me. I have a lot of flaws, and there are some things that I don't do very well. But one thing I do very well are forensic investigations. And I will tell you, this was one of the easiest evidence trails I've ever followed. And it went straight to the Knights Templar and nobody but them. So I don't know what you want from me, people, but that's where it went. That's who carved it. And we know why they carved it. And it's an amazing story. And it really sheds new light on the history of the United States of America that a lot of people in this country are going to be uncomfortable with. But you know what? It's one of those inconvenient truths that I don't really care what you think. The data is the data, the results are the results, and the truth is the truth. Here it comes.
If the stone is authentic, what should it suggest about the Norse exploration and inland North America?
Well, look, everybody at this stage accepts that the Vikings, right? The Viking Norse were in North America going back to about the year 800. I think they were there before that, all the way up to the beginning of the 11th century, when frankly the indigenous people killed them and kicked them out. And the reason is because they did not treat the indigenous people here with the proper respect. And they just did what they wanted, and they said, "Screw you! We're going to do what we wanted." And they said, "No, screw you." And I learned this when I was in Sweat Lodge with the Ojibwa, and they told me exactly what happened. And think about this, Bob. If anybody knows what happened on this continent prior to contact, it would be them, don't you think?
Yeah, exactly.
And they know. And they also know all about the Templars because when I asked them, when it was my turn to speak, and the medicine man said, "Scott, go ahead and ask your questions." I said, "Well, I want to ask you some questions about the Knights Templar." And you know what he said to me?
Go on.
He said, "Oh, you mean our blood brothers?"
Oh,
It went pretty good after that.
I can imagine so as well.
Yeah.
My God.
And
Um,
go ahead.
how does I think it pronounce it right? Olaf Ullmann's account of findings the stone influenced historians and views on credibility.
Well, um, as a matter of fact, if I wasn't doing this interview, I'd be having lunch with Olaf Ullmann's grandson, Darwin
Ah,
Ullmann. He's 81, about to be 82 years old. And I met him a few years after we started the investigation. In fact, I met him first in 2004. And I already concluded the runestone was genuine, but I wanted to talk to the family. And the first thing he said to me is, he said, "Scott, there's never been a doubt in this family. We know the runestone's authentic. Olaf Ullmann was telling the truth the whole time." And I got to know Olaf Ullmann through his descendants, through his writings, through his book collection, through his own statements that are on record in the Minnesota Historical Society. And I can tell you now, there is no way that Olaf Ullmann could have even come close to carving the inscription on the stone. There was nobody alive at that time in North America that could have carved this inscription. because in 2016, when I was initiated as a Freemason,
Hmm.
and early in, or excuse me, that was late 2015 and early 2016 when I was knighted as a Knights Templar. I was going through one of the degrees in the Cryptic Council. And at one point, one of the white hats, a white hat is a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Mason. And he said, and the other 8 arches were built by 22 men from Gebel, Lebanon. And I went, wait a minute, 8 and 22, those are the first 2 numbers on the Kensington runestone. And I didn't hear another thing after that. And when the ritual was over or the lecture was over, I went up to one of my Masonic brothers and I said, hey, is there a ritual book for this? He said, yes. I said, give me that. And oh my God, it's all there. The point is this inscription is filled with symbolism, allegory, code, and real information. Straightforward, factual information. The difficult part is figuring out what's what, right?
Hmm.
And it's not until you are initiated, and I've been through every degree that Freemasonry offers, just about. I'm not a 33rd, I'm a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Mason. And I now understand when I'm reading allegory and I know what symbolism is. I understand the codes that we found in the runestone. And to my knowledge, I'm the first person to understand that. And it tells me that there was nobody else that could have carved this. It says it's a land claim. It's dated 1362. There's a Easter table dating code that's embedded within the inscription that nobody ever saw, that was consistent with the tradition on the island of Gotland. So everything fits as it must if you're on the right track.
Hmm.
I could go on for hours, Bob. This is the most important historical artifact found on this continent for sure, and possibly the world, because it changes everything.
This thing, yeah. How has the stone influenced Minnesota's local identity and tourism then? Has it helped?
Yes, it has. I mean, but it's kind of funny because our state was settled primarily by Scandinavians, mostly Swedes and Norwegians, and obviously we had a strong influence there and heritage there. I find it interesting that people associate our state with the Vikings and the runestone, but they don't understand that 1362 was long after the Viking Age. They were not Vikings, they were Templars.
Yeah.
But that's okay. I mean, we're not going to change that, but there is a strong identity with Scandinavia for sure in our state, and it's something that we're proud of. I'm a big Viking fan. I'm Norwegian as part of my heritage, German, English, Irish, Welsh, Scottish. I'm a mutt.
Why has the community been so divided over the Kensington runestone for more than a century? Why has it
well,
been like that?
well, you know what? It's pretty simple. I'm a professional. Okay, I'm a licensed professional geologist. Um, I take my work very seriously, and the people that have passed judgment on the Kensington runestone up until I came along were academics. And I'm not saying that academia is bad, but in this case, we're talking about humanities disciplines, language, runes, dialect, history, um, archaeology. Now, these are all wonderful disciplines. And again, I'm not trying to be dismissive, but what I find rather humorous, frankly, is that many of these people over the years, and some still do, criticize me for not understanding scientific method. Now, by education and by profession, I'm a geologist. I am a hard scientist. I do forensics for a living. I do I do hard science every day. That's all I do.
Yeah.
And not only do I take my work very seriously, but as a licensed professional, I need to be prepared to testify in a court of law under oath to my findings. Now, and I'm happy to do that. Uh, and I have made public challenges. And I'll make another one here on your show, Bob. Any academic that wants to take me on in a debate on the Kensington Runestone, I will go on this show. I will go on anybody's show. I'll go stand in Washington, D.C. on the steps of the Capitol and I'll debate you right there. And you know what I'll do? I'll wipe your ass up. Because think about this, okay? This is true.
Yeah.
This is the dirty little secret of forensic work, okay? When you have voluminous data in multiple disciplines, history of the late 19th century, history of the 14th century, language, runes, dialect, grammar, dating, geology, history, archaeology, I don't care. All of it is consistent, cohesive, and conclusive. The runestone is authentic, okay? Once you say that, how can there possibly be evidence to support the contrary? It can't exist, and it doesn't exist. That's why nobody has and nobody will take me up on my offer because, like I said, I'll wipe the floor up with them. Now, why doesn't that change people's minds? There's a reason. There is a reason.
I bet there is as well, because if it were a hoax, you know, who might have made it or and why?
I mean, at this point, to me, this is a waste of energy because there's no evidence to support a hoax. That's a human thing, right?
Yeah.
And, people say, well, it's a hoax. Okay, well, then who did it? How did they come up with an inscription that has perfect runes that the scholars said never existed, yet they did exist in the 14th century? Why are there codes embedded within the runestone? Why am I the first guy to see these things? Why is it that the Kensington runestone diagonally was split down intentionally by the carver to exactly 1 megalithic yard? Exactly. Why is it the sacred 2-to-1 ratio that is the key to sacred geometry, that it was so important to the Cistercians and the Knights Templar? Are these coincidences? Just stop. Why are there 9 lines of text on the face side, 3 on the side for a total of 12? And in the cryptic degree that I was talking about, the hours of labor were done from 9 until midnight when all prying eyes are closed in sleep. These are symbolic representations of something that is ancient. And so, unfortunately for the academics, they're going to have to sit down, shut up, and stop talking and do something that they don't do very well. Listen.
Yeah.
You know what a wise man once said to me? And you don't know who this guy is, but some of the people in America that are over 50 will know this guy. His name was Bud Grant. And I had the honor of knowing him for about 35, maybe close to 40 years. He died 2 years ago. He was
Yeah.
the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings football team. And when I was in college, one of his sons was my best friend. And we were playing basketball and we came in the house and Bud was watching TV and we got some drinks and I'm talking. And Bud said, "Scott." And he turned around and looked at me and he said this: "You never learn anything when you're talking."
And that's true. Because many coaches say, "Shut up. I'm talking."
Well, that was a nice diplomatic way of telling me to shut up. And believe me, I heard him.
I bet you did. What does the inscription story about the, I think it's Gotland explorator and deaths reveal about the people who supposedly carved it?
Well, what it's talking about, it's telling us who carved it. People from Sweden and people from Norway. Um, I'm about to publish a book, and hang on one sec.
No problem.
All right. I'm I'm grabbing a prop. Okay,
Yeah,
this is the book,
yeah.
and it's called the Greatest Templar Tale Never Told, the Sinclair Weems Journals. And it, you know what we call it? We call it National Treasure on steroids. Only this story is true. And it's incredible. And what it details is the story of what happened to the Templar treasures after the Templars were put down in 1307 by the King of France and the Roman Catholic Church. Now, you live it over in the UK, and you know the story probably better than anybody about what happened historically. The Knights Templar became very rich and powerful, and then an arrest order came down on October 1307. 600 knights were arrested in France. About 60 of them were burned at the stake. And by 1314, that was it. But the arrest order also sent church and agents of the king to the western port of France called La Rochelle, where there were 18 ships, Templar ships, that were anchored there. But on the morning of October 13th, when the agents went to confiscate those ships, they were gone. They disappeared into history. This book will tell you from a firsthand narrative perspective exactly what happened. Those treasures went to Scotland. They were hidden there for about 80 something years. And then in 1395 and 1398, they were brought over to North America, buried in multiple places, including Oak Island, for someday. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is the Templars wanted to establish a sanctuary, like it says on the Kensington runestone, far to the west, a place that they had already been to many times, a place that their ancestors had been to many times. This fictional notion that Christopher Columbus discovered America is just batshit crazy. I mean, he never set foot on the land we now call the United States of America during his 4 trips. He only set foot on North America one time on the 4th trip in the land that we now call Panama. So this is just nonsense. But look, when the Templars began to come over here starting in the early part of the 12th century, you remember what I told you about the Vikings.
Yeah.
They did not treat the indigenous people with respect, so they kicked them out before they were able to get a stronghold. But when the Templars came over, they were different. They respected the indigenous people. They bonded with them through ritual and intermarriage. And I can tell you that the indigenous people have been practicing what we now call Freemasonry for tens of thousands of years. I wrote about their rituals, and I know what those rituals are because I've been through them. They also bonded through intermarriage. That is why the Templars had free reign to go all over North and South America for over 400 years before settlement. And that's why they were able to get to Kensington, Minnesota. They didn't fight their way to get to Kensington. They traveled with their brothers. And that's the story that I've been telling. and the details about what happened to those treasures. The Sinclairs and the Weems clans in Scotland, because when the Templars came over, one of the things they did is they fought at Bannockburn. Now, for centuries, that's been a legend, but it's true because it's in these documents. And because the Templars served at Bannockburn and helped the Scots defeat the English, and I'm not telling anything that you don't know. You know this history probably better than me.
Don't know about that.
Ah, well, those clans were obligated to protect those Templars and their descendants and the treasures. And what they wanted to do was to establish that sanctuary that they called in the documents a free Templar state. They also called it the New Jerusalem. Brother Francis Bacon called it the New Atlantis.
Oh,
Today we call it the United States of America. And those clans came over to North America every generation. The tradition was you were to visit the Western lands to check on the treasures twice in your lifetime, once with your father, once with your son. And they did that for 417 years and 15 generations until someday came in 1769 and 1770 when 46 young Freemasons and 6 slaves went up to Nova Scotia, recovered those treasures, including the one on Oak Island. They're digging in a dry hole, but after
um,
12 seasons of nothing, I think we already know that, right?
yeah.
And they brought those treasures back, and the gold and the silver was used in part to fund the revolution.
Mm.
So that's the real story of the founding of America. But there are certain entities that don't want this to come forward, like the Roman Catholic Church. And I'll just be frank with you, Bob. What's happening in our country right now is an abomination. They are destroying this republic that our founding fathers set up for us. Not only were they all Freemasons, let me correct that. I'll give you the facts. 53 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Master Masons. They were also Knights Templar. They just didn't tell anyone.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we are still here today. And it's my job as a Templar to bring forth this truth now more than ever, because this republic and this country that our brothers in the celestial lodge in the sky today founded is under siege. And it's important that people who think they understand the history know the real history, so we can save this republic and go back to being, the good partners, the good neighbors, to people like the countries in Europe, and not be the rude jackasses that we are now. I'm just speaking truth, brother, and you know it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. How does the Kensington Stone compare with other disputes and artifacts like the Newport Tower and I think it's the Vinlord map?
Oh, the Vinland map.
Yeah.
Well, the Vinland map, I think, is authentic. And I think it needs to be looked at more carefully. Now, again, you've got a lot of influences, larger forces at work that are up against us. They do not want this truth to come out. The church is the main funder of the opposition, and they are funding things like Wikipedia. They are the largest funder of the Smithsonian Institution. You've never heard that before, but if you follow the money, that's where you find the truth, right? And there are a lot of things that the Smithsonian Institution is hiding from us. They say that the Newport Tower is a windmill. For God's sakes, ask any structural engineer. My son Grant is a structural engineer. One time I gave a technical presentation about our forensic work to a group of structural engineers. And before I started my lecture, I flashed up a picture of the Newport Tower. And I asked them, I said, guys, indulge me. This is the Newport Tower. It's in Rhode Island. Um, it's mysterious. It dates back to at least 1677. The first documented record that's accepted is Benedict Arnold's will. Could this structure serve as a windmill? And you know what the reaction was?
Go on.
Uncomfortable chuckling.
Oh,
They laughed and they said, well, there's no steel reinforcement. The lateral forces from the wind and the sails would rip it apart. So that is the official, narrative, is that it's a windmill. It's not even round, for God's sakes. It's not. It's not a damn windmill. Just stop. Jesus. Now, you may or may not know this, but there is a direct connection between the Kensington Runestone and the Newport Tower. And
oh,
there's all kinds of astronomical alignments that have been incorporated into various aspects of the Newport Tower. Nobody debates those. What the hell do we need that stuff for in a windmill when people are trying to survive during settlement, right? Because that's not what it is. But there is a long range alignment that connects directly to the Kensington Runestone that I published in 2009. And it is now 16 years later. And don't you think, Bob, if there was somebody that could prove me wrong on that point, that I wouldn't have heard about it by now? You know what I've heard?
go
Crickets.
on.
Make no mistake, the same tradition that carved the Kensington Runestone built the Newport Tower. And there's a lot of other artifacts that have been found on the east coast of North America that are connected to this tradition, but they've all been dismissed as fakes. I mean, it's laughable. It really is. But it tells you that there are larger forces at work.
I can imagine. So before I move on, I just wanted um, to ask you about the concrete, the damage at the Pentagon. What did you find out about the concrete then?
Well, I've had a lot of people that have contacted me over the years that want to know about her work, and oh, it was a missile this, and all this. Look, I'm okay with people asking questions. I don't want to be dismissive of people that are curious. Now, crazy stuff, I'm not going to tolerate that. But if somebody wants to ask an intelligent question, I'll answer it. And in most cases, I've had people ask me questions, I explain it, and they accept it, and they move on.
Hmm.
Now, um, the fire, what is hard for people to understand and appreciate is that when the plane hit the building, it came in at a 60-degree angle to the west side of the building, and the wings were immediately destroyed. And after that, it basically became a missile that hit at grade. And the first two floors of the Pentagon are continuous. It's like being in any office building. But from 3 to 5 floors, there are open bays between each ring. There's 5 rings, okay?
Yeah.
And so from the air, when you look down at the Pentagon, you don't see a lot of exterior damage because the plane traveled essentially inside the first 2 stories of the building.
Hmm.
It went through 3 rings, and then it punched a hole in the CD ring, which actually goes all the way to grade. That's the only ring that's open all the way to grade so trucks can access the inside of the building.
Yeah.
It punched a hole in the back of the C ring wall, and remains and debris ended up in the drive lane area. And when you go there and look at it, it's a circle. And that's why people think that it was a missile. But when you take the wings off of a plane, it becomes a missile.
Of course it does. Yeah.
And right inside that hole, just to the right, If you look at a picture, you will see that there is a V with a cross, a line through it like this, which stands for victim. A line through it means deceased. And that's where all the victims and the remains were. But it had gone through 3 rings, 6 layers of steel reinforced concrete uh, beams and columns.
Hmm.
And it was in that C ring area where the jet fuel fire was confined and the temperatures reached over 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, 573 degrees Celsius. And at that temperature, quartz goes through a phase change and it suddenly expands. And I saw concrete that had silicious, quartz rich aggregates that had exploded like
Yeah.
they were a bomb, literally shattered. And I remember my son and daughter were young at that time. And I remember I came home one day with one of the samples of the concrete and I said, "Hey, Grant, Amanda, look at this." And I crushed it with my hands. They're like, "Oh, Dad, you're so strong." But that tells you the level of damage. I
Oh
have
God.
never
Yeah.
seen fire damage in
Oh.
concrete, and I've seen a lot of it that
Hmm.
was that dramatic, that severe. It was unbelievable.
It's fascinating, the work you're doing, such things like that, and finding out how it went in and how it
Yeah.
exploded, and the temperature must have been absolutely out of this world.
Well, one of my good friends, he's still one of my good friends in the industry. His name is Leo Titus. He works for engineering consulting services. He's getting close to retirement age, but at the time, he was a structural engineer that I worked with all the time. What I didn't know is he was a member of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. He was the first guy in the building. And his job was to make sure the outer ring, the E ring had collapsed, or yeah, I get it was the A ring. I'm sorry, it's A through E going in,
Right.
and it had just collapsed when he arrived. And he was the first person to go in the building and make sure that it was safe for the search and rescue and the rescue dogs to go into the building. It was his job to make sure, shore this up, and they did that with timbers. But as he went through the building, he was taking photographs. And he told me, he said, I could tell the difference between human remains and, say, a wooden desk by the color of the ash.
Oh my God.
Yeah, yeah. And so when people tell me that it was a missile, I get a little pissed off about it. So, and so does Leo. And we talked about this recently. We still get calls. And I don't know what to tell people that are just married to their conspiracy theories. They just don't want to give it up. Well, you're free to do that, but you're wasting my time if that's what you're going to do.
Read too much into it. They always People just go on internet, look at things, and have their opinion, and they stick by it, don't they?
Yeah. Well, I understand how, people, will take a certain amount of information and they'll develop a theory and they believe in it so strongly. And sometimes even when you have irrefutable evidence that's just, punching you in the face, they still don't want to accept it. And that's just one of those human condition things that I can't do anything about. Like I said, I explained it to them. If they accept it, great. If they don't, sayonara.
Did you have anything to do with 9/11 then?
Well, the Pentagon, this is during 9/11. You're talking about up in New York with the towers.
Yeah, with the towers, yeah.
Well, it's funny you asked that because one of my clients was a structural engineer with Thornton Tomasetti, and he was literally the next day climbing on the pile. And he called me on his phone and he said, "Scott, can you do anything with dust, concrete dust?" I
Oh,
said,
God.
"Unfortunately, no." So no, I didn't do any work there. Um, no, it was just at the Pentagon, so I can't say anything about what happened there. Although there's some pretty fishy stuff Building 7 that went down hours after the towers came down that structurally was fine. That was a controlled demolition in my mind, but that's just my opinion. I don't
I
have
know.
any evidence other than the video to support that. It looked like a controlled demolition to me.
Right. I just want to do a little bit on Knights Templar, if that's all right with you.
Absolutely.
What was the original purpose of the Knights Templar when they were founded in the early 12th century?
Well, the truth of the matter is the Knights Templar Order were originally founded when Saint Bernard de Clairvaux. Do you know who Bernard is?
I've heard about it, but
Uh, well,
explain to
he
me.
he was from one of the southern Burgundian families, joined the Cistercian order when there was one abbey in Citeaux, France. But he joined the abbey in 1113 with 30 family members, including two of the first Grand Masters, including the first Grand Master, Hugh de Payens. Now, what this was a coup d'etat of these bloodline families that took over the Cistercians, and Bernard founded the first daughter abbey at Clairvaux, hence Bernard of Clairvaux,
Hmm.
2 years later in 1115. Now, by the time he died in 1153, there were over 300 Cistercian abbeys all across Europe into the British Isles, Scandinavia, to the Holy Land. Now, think about that. In just over, not even, it was 40 years, they went from one abbey to over 300. By the time the Templars were put down, just over 200 years later, there were 750 abbeys and two or 300 commanderies, Templar commanderies. Make no mistake, the Knights Templar were Cistercian monks. They wore white tunics with black mantles, just
Hmm.
like the Cistercian monks did. The only difference was they wore red crosses. They were allowed to eat meat for protein because they were the ones carrying the swords doing the dirty work, right? Now, when the Templars fought in the First Crusade and helped capture Jerusalem, the narrative is they did it for Christendom, right? That's bullshit. They did it to establish a base of operations in the region so that they could go into Lebanon, into Turkey, into Egypt, and other places in the region to round up stuff they knew was there because that information was passed down through these families. And once they rounded everything up, they weren't defeated and kicked out of Jerusalem. They were done. And the plan all along from the beginning was to establish that sanctuary over here. And slowly but surely, they became rich and powerful. They built up their treasury because the plan was to come over here to bond with their indigenous brothers and found this nation that we now call the United States. What's interesting is in our Constitution, we have something that says, and I'm paraphrasing, every single person born in this world has certain inalienable rights, regardless of race, sex, color, creed. Do you know where that first appears?
When?
In one of the Grail romances written in the early 1200s.
Well,
You ever heard of Parsifal?
no, I haven't. No. It's
Those
interesting.
were those were written by the Knights Templar, and it made its way into our Constitution. Now, how the heck did that happen?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, now you know.
I really do. Yeah. Steph,
Does this make sense to you?
it does. It does. There's a question from Steph. Wait, I'll get it up here. Question for Scott. Why did the government take all the CC footage from the gas station near the Pentagon?
Why did they take? Because they take everything when something happens like this and they keep it from us. I mean, my God, What's happening with the Epstein files, right? I mean, what's happening to the JFK tapes? I mean, my God, they don't want us to know the truth because the truth is our own government is behind most of the garbage that happens.
It is, yeah.
I mean, that's the simple answer.
Well, that's fair enough. Why and how were the Knights Templar officially disbanded by the Pope in the early 14th century?
Because they figured out that the Templars were not the fighting force and not ideologically aligned with them. Bernard de Clairvaux had a fascination with the Virgin Mary, right?
Yeah,
And so did the Templars, right? But the truth of the matter is, she was a metaphor. She represented Mary Magdalene, Isis, and all the goddesses of every culture in the past, okay? Because if you go back far enough, before the Roman Church was founded with this patriarchal bullshit that has caused more damage in the history of humanity than people realize by devaluing women and this patriarchal crap that has thrown our whole world out of balance. They venerated the sacred feminine, and the church finally figured it out, and they were pissed. That's why they arrested them, they tortured and burned them. You burn people because you're pissed, because they were duped for over 200 years. That's the truth. In fact, let me tell you something, Bob. Do you know what Bernard's miracle is? You know, every person that is saint, reaches sainthood has a miracle associated with them, right?
yeah.
Do you know what Bernard's miracle is?
Go on then.
The story goes that he was preaching to the brethren in the church of the monastery at Clairvaux. Behind him was a statue of the Virgin. And at one point, he stopped preaching and he turned and he looked to the Virgin, and she pulled her shawl and exposed her breast and squeezed milk into his mouth. Now, some people might say that has sexual overtones. It has nothing to do with sex. It's all about life. And if you don't believe me, Google it.
Right, will do. A lot of people will do in the chat room, or whoever listens to it later. Mason's in the chat room. He just wants a question. Good evening, Scott. Your talk tonight is wonderful. Are the Knights Templars still active?
Well, in 1934, there was a council that was called in Europe, called the Council of Fiducie. And that was where all of the Templar traditions that had splintered off were to reassemble and catalog and collect all of the ancient knowledge that they were protecting. Unfortunately, there was a guy by the name of Adolf Hitler who was obsessed with the Templars and obsessed with the Grail, the ancient knowledge that he knew they had. And he was the one that ordered the arrest of all the Freemasons. Because in Freemasonry, not all Freemasons become Knights Templar, but pretty much all Knights Templar have gone through the Masonic degrees. Those orders were arrested. They were put in concentration camps. They were interrogated. They were tortured. And Hitler was able to get some of that ancient technology and information. One of them was called the Bell Project, which was basically about anti-gravity.
That's right, yeah.
And so what happened was the orders that survived left Europe and they came over to the United States and they hid their knowledge here. And so the answer to the question is yes, our traditions still survives. But after World War II and the damage that was done by the Nazis, we've been, let's just say we've been crippled ever since. But we're still standing.
Right. A question from Steph here. Question for Scott. How are the Order of Malta related to Knights Templar, or is it
That's
just an offshoot?
that is a Templar order that is splintered off and went down its own trail. So they are one of these Templar orders I'm talking about.
Right, right. Um, were the were the Knights Templar actually the guardians of the Holy Grail, or is this entirely a later invention?
Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to define what the Holy Grail is, right? And the Holy Grail is different things to different people. Some people think it's the cup that Jesus used at the Last Supper. Some people think it's the bloodline. Some people think it's treasure. And of course, that begs the question, what is your definition of treasure? Some people think it's spiritual enlightenment. Some people think it's a combination or all of those things. Um, to me, the Grail is enlightenment. But part of that enlightenment involves understanding ancient knowledge, ancient technology, understanding ancient traditions. Um, I guess it really depends on your point of view. But some people say it's the bloodline, and I think there's something to that. And were the Templars in charge of guarding that bloodline? Absolutely, because they were part of it. And
Yeah, yeah.
by the way, that bloodline, it's still around today.
I can imagine so as well. I know one Sinclair is.
Well, think about this, Bob, and the audience will get this. Nobody is going to debate that the 8+ billion people that are walking on this planet today, every single one of us have ancestors that were alive 2,000 years ago, right?
Yeah.
That's a fact. So why is it such a stretch to say that Jesus and Mary Magdalene? Oh, by the way, did you know that Mary Magdalene was married to John the Baptist before she married Jesus?
No.
She was. She was married to John the Baptist and they had a son. Because what a lot of people don't understand, in the Essenic tradition, of which they were all a part of, to be a rabbi at that time, not only was it a requirement to be married, it was a requirement to have a son for succession.
Oh,
And they had a son. His name was Jesus. That's what we would pronounce it as today.
right.
And what happened to him?
Execute.
Right? He was beheaded. What most people don't understand in the Essenic tradition, the priestly line back then went through the feminine, through her.
Ah, right.
So a family member was obligated to marry her, and that was Yeshua. His name was not Jesus. There was no J back then.
No.
His name was Yeshua, and they had a son, and his name was Judah. And if you don't believe me, Google the Telpiat tomb. Have you ever heard of the Telpiat tomb, Bob?
No, I haven't. No, but I will do now.
Okay, the Telpiat tomb is in Jerusalem. It was discovered in 1980. It's been covered up. It's a first century tomb. Nobody argues that it's a first century tomb, but the tradition of the Essene was to bury their dead in a box after the body had been wrapped in a shroud, put inside of a burial chamber to desiccate for 1 to 2 years. Then they would collect the bones and put them inside of a box called an ossuary that was only large enough so the two largest bones in the body, the femurs, fit in crossed. The skull goes in last, and now you know the origin of the skull and crossbones symbol.
You do now, yeah.
Inside this tomb, there were 10 ossuaries found. 7 inscribed with names, 6 in Aramaic, 1 in Greek. Names like Jesus or Yeshua, son of Joseph, James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus, Maria, Matthew, Joseph, Judah, son of Jesus. And the one carved in Greek says Mary Emne the Mara. Mary Emne is a pet name for only Mary Magdalene found in the Acts of Philip. The Mara is a title of honor, as in Lord, Master, or Queen. Mary Magdalene, Jesus, and their son Judah are all in this tomb. Why don't you know about it? There's a reason. Look it up. People need to get educated and understand the truth of our history. This whole bloodline thing isn't some fanciful Da Vinci Code fiction. It's true. And it's time people understood. Now, having said that, I'm part of this bloodline, but I hate to break it to you. I'm not special. There's probably millions of people out there that are part of this bloodline. But who cares? What's important is the truth. And there are active forces that do not want this to come out.
Mm.
Hey, why do you think they call the runestone a hoax? The reason they do that is because is because they know that if it gets accepted as an authentic artifact, it triggers a series of dominoes to fall, and they go to some inconvenient places. And one of those places is the Telpia tomb. Look it up, folks, and do your own research. One of the places that the Templars went when they captured Jerusalem in the First Crusade, they went into their family tomb and they took the bones of their ancestors. Why did they do that? Well, let's see. If you've got the skull of Jesus, oh, that might give you some leverage against the Roman Church, right? This is one of the reasons the Templars became so rich and powerful. You screw with us, we'll screw with you.
You. I like that. Mason's just asked a question. Scott, was Jesus the Son of God in your view?
Well, it's going to come out. How do I say this? You know, in the last several years, all around the world, we've heard an awful lot about extraterrestrials, haven't we?
Yes, we have, yeah.
And if you ask me, is there an extraterrestrial component to this person that lived 2,000 years ago, whose name was Yeshua, we now call Jesus? The answer is yes.
Right.
That's all I'm going to say about that.
That's fair enough. Right.
I'm throwing a lot at people, and I really, I do want to say one thing, Bob, if you'll indulge me for a second.
Yeah, no problem.
When I give lectures, and I should do it more when I do interviews like this, I tell the audience, I said, look, when you're having a discussion about faith and religion, that's one thing. When you're talking about facts, science, and history, that's another discussion. Okay? You can't mix the two.
No.
And I'm talking about this. Okay? I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm really not. But you have to understand that I'm focusing on this. I'm not trying to offend anybody here. And so I just want people to understand that. And I always ask them in these lectures, are you cool with that? And they always say yes. And then I say, okay, well, based on what I'm going to say going forward here, if you do get offended, it's your own fault. Okay. But I mean that, and I'm serious. I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm just trying to get to the truth. I did my job. When I studied the Kensington runestone, I reached my conclusion and I was attacked. And it was not pretty.
No, I
But
bet it won't.
I went to college on a football scholarship and I was a linebacker and I don't back down to anybody. And so when they said, "You're wrong," and they attacked me, I put the pads on and I went to Sweden 5 times.
I bet you did, to prove everybody wrong.
Well, it wasn't about proving everybody wrong. It was just going out and finding the evidence that I knew had to be there because the rock said so. I
And
trust the rocks. I've always trusted them. They've never let me down.
you've done a really good job as well.
Oh, look at you, man.
We're about nearly finished. We'll have to get you back on another time. So,
Anytime. I'd love it. I do spend part of the year over in Europe and I miss the accent. Of course, you're going to tell me I have an accent, but it's actually you, Bob.
well, a lot of people think I'm from Scotland. I'm a Yorkshire lad,
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
born and bred in Yorkshire,
oh, good on you.
the biggest
I
county in England.
To me, you guys all sound the same over there in the British Isles. But I love it. I love it. Seriously, the people are wonderful there, and all I can tell you is we are going to figure out this mess, and we're going to become the good partners that we were in the future. And I'm sorry we have to go through these tough times, but
No.
when you go through rough waters, um, the smooth ocean will show up sooner or later.
I hope so as well, because we're going through a rough time in the UK, besides
Yeah,
you over there as well, and
yeah.
around the world, in fact.
Well, you know something, if you want to get into prophecies and things like that, we are going through a tumultuous time that was predicted long ago. And it has to do with something called precession of the equinoxes. And we are going through a transition right now of the age of Pisces the fish. Jesus was, right, the follower of the fish. Christians follow the fish. Well, it has to do with astronomy. And we are transitioning from the age of Pisces the fish to Aquarius. You remember that song that the Fifth Dimension sang?
Mm,
This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius.
yeah,
So this is a very important time that only comes along about every 2100 years. But know this, Bob, this time that we're going through is not just the transition from the age of Pisces to Aquarius, but it is also the end of the 26,000 year long cycle of all 12 of the primary constellations of the zodiac. So everybody that's walking on the planet today is living through one of the most profound moments in human history. And it was predicted to be a time of great difficulties. And Lord, don't we know that's happening, right?
we do.
But it's up to us to decide how it's going to turn out.
Can we change it then?
Yes, we can. But it starts with accepting truth and facts. It also involves being good to each other. We need to treat each other and our planet with respect. I mean, who's pisses in their own household? That's what we're doing to our planet. This is our home.
It
And
is.
it's not just our home. This planet is one of the crown jewels of the universe. And there are others that are watching and they don't
Yeah,
like what we're doing. They're not going to intercede. They're not going to fix it for us. We have to pull our heads out of our rear ends and figure it out. That's part of the reason why I'm coming on here and I'm talking straight to everybody. And everybody deep down knows what I'm telling you is the truth.
it is.
And everybody needs to do their part. And sometimes it's just as simple as opening a door for a stranger.
You're right. It's
Yeah.
so true. It's so true, is that as well?
Yeah. And when you're in you know, and let's face it, Bob, you and I both have a platform, and we can reach out to many people. And we're very fortunate to have that platform. And with that comes a responsibility. I know you know that. And so I want to have fun. I want to teach people. I want to have a good time like anybody else. But at the end of the day, this is serious work. And I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you.
And, and I hope people will take this message in the spirit that it's intended.
I'm sure they will do. But what a great guest you are on my show tonight. It's been
Aw.
wonderful. I've enjoyed it, and everybody else will enjoy it. Where they can always watch it on YouTube live. Where can people get your books if they want to get your books?
Okay, well, obviously they can go on Amazon and find it, but if you want signed copies that I sign myself, I wrap them up and I ship them. You can go to my website, which is scottfwolter, one word.com, and just scroll down a little ways and you'll see the books there. You can also you can go to my blog, which is scottwolteranswers.blogspot.com, and I will answer all questions. Um, and you will see quite a lot of content there. I used to, when I was doing America on Earth, I would post a blog after every episode, and I would encourage people to watch the show that I did recently on the streaming platform Gaia, Gaia. That's called, it's a 10 episode series called Mysteries of the Knights Templar. And it's actually doing quite well. And the rumors are we may do another season.
Ooh,
So when I can make an official announcement, I will. But stay tuned.
fantastic! Yeah, I've seen you on a few TV shows over the years as well, so I know you are, and I've always wanted to get you on my show.
Well, I appreciate that. I've done some other things, and um, you know, I have to say I've been on an amazing journey. I think we brought a lot of truth to the world through the television shows, through the books, through you know, the work that we do. But I
Yeah,
can tell you that the best is yet to come. We're sitting on some more secrets that um, I did a little hint today, but we have a lot more coming.
brilliant! I like it. I like it. I understand that.
Yeah, well, anyway, we'll save that for the next time. But Bob, thank you for having me on. I sincerely appreciate it, and
Yes, thank you.
I look forward to the next time.
Yeah, I do as well. Thank you again.
Okay, Bob. Take care. Thanks,
Yeah, bye.
everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. My guest on Friday is Jeremiah Horseman on Friday. We'll have a fantastic show with him. Thank you to everybody in the chat room, and thank you to Scott. What an interesting guy to interview tonight. He's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you again. Good night and God bless.